Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi. My name is, well, Mike Else, but some folks know me as Professor Kliq. Now for something completely different. I'm here to talk about the tenets of Creative Commons in the context of music and releasing music with a Creative Commons license. Forewarning, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an independent musician, and when I say independent, I mean that in like the scariest, most uncomfortable way possible. I'm not on a label, I don't have a manager, I don't have a promoter, I don't have an accountant, which I am reminded of frequently, especially come tax time. So it's just me. So the only way that I know how to tell the story about how Creative Commons is valuable is to tell you my story, because it's that story that almost literally has brought me here today, which I'd actually like to thank Jeremy Davis and Taurus Baylog for physically transporting me to this room right now in front of fine people. So, me and Creative Commons go back a little while, which is part of the story. My name again is Professor Kliq, and that's my logo because I'm also a web designer and a regular designer. So here we go. I'm going to tell you this great big long story, and hopefully it's not a yawner, but I think it's pretty cool, and it's been a lot of fun living this story. So, back in 1999, my mom got our family's first computer, and I was like 12 when this happened. And it was a Pentium 2, it was a Dell XPS Pentium 2 400 megahertz processor with 128 megabytes of RAM, 12 gigabyte hard drive, 5400 RPMs. I remember that because when I look at my phone, I'm like, this is better than that in every way. It makes me really uncomfortable. Now, I had been like kind of into music. My grandfather and my uncle were both jazz musicians, and they did this. And my mom and my dad and my brother at one point were all bodybuilders. And so I was more like this. And so that was cool. And so when we got a computer, I was like, okay, what can I do with this thing for like music? Because I knew that that was like sort of a thing. And I had like almost immediately discovered this little shovelware application that came with our Turtle Beach Montego sound card, where you could arrange and like edit MIDI files and like pan this thing to the left and turn this into a flugelhorn or a Jew harp. And I didn't know what any of those things were. But the whole like MIDI thing was something that escaped me, and I didn't know really what was going on. But I knew that there was a lot of capacity here to do something cool, because like I said, I was doing this all the time. So anything that had the capacity for me to do this, I'm on board. So I had a music machine, and well, actually no, because my mom had a music machine. I just turned it into a music machine. Well, it was a music machine between the hours of like 3:30 and like 6, Monday through Thursday. Or if my mom came home early, she'd come home to like the Harman Kardon desktop speakers, just farting out like the 909 kick on like Rebirth, which I remember paying for $150 for Rebirth, and now it's like 7 on the App Store. And I'm only 27, so I know I'm not that old. It's just technology. So, and in having this music machine and spending so much time at it and being so hooked on it, I was like, okay, so this machine can actually do a lot of different things. And I realized that I had sort of unlocked a world of like endless possibilities. And I had this sort of eureka moment where I was like, well, if you can use a computer to make music, if you can use a computer to do these other things, you can use a computer to do anything. And you can learn how to do these things. And this was before like Google's prominence of learning how to do things with a computer. And I felt like I had unlocked this whole new world. I even got into doing things with like some basic telephony, where I would take my Sega Dreamcast. If anyone knows what that is. Okay, good, because that runs throughout the whole story. Weirdly enough, I would take my Sega Dreamcast and dial it into the computer's like phone modem, and then reroute it through the Ethernet so that I could get faster internet speeds and not tie up the phone line, so that my buddy Adam and I could download like gross pictures off of like rotten.com and then spray paint them on the walls of Jet Grind Radio, which, anybody know what that is? Well, it's a fiercely Japanese game. It's extremely Japanese, and it's also extremely awesome. So when I was doing all this stuff, doing a lot of tinkering, my mom thought that like when I would use the computer and I'd be up like all night, she'd hear like, we had a super loud mouse. Mice were really loud back then. Keyboards were really loud. And it was always like a nuisance to her, but she had no hesitation in asking me for help about doing anything from like configuring her pop account on Outlook to making the mouse cursor a little bit bigger. But she would inevitably run into these problems or bigger problems, and she would get so frustrated, which, you know, we're all familiar with those moments of why won't you just do the thing I need you to do. And she'd ask me for help, and she would say things like, you know, I just don't get technology, I don't think I'm tech savvy, which I thought was kind of like a really hefty thing to say, and that quote ended up sort of following me through like the rest of my life, being like, why? Oh, you just have to let it do its thing. And I would tell my mom, like, you know, these machines are meant for people to use. They're made by other people for other people to create things with. I mean, I remember her talking on the phone to Dell, telling them, you know, what she wanted the computer to do, and her being really excited that soon that she would be able to do it. And now she has it, and she doesn't know what to do with it. So I would tell her, like, Mom, this machine was made by other people for you to use. Computers and pretty much all things that people make are made to help other people create with, to inspire, and to inform. Once you get the humanity of it, everything becomes pretty clear, even if it takes some time. So that's what I was doing when I was like 12. I had a really good time doing it. I did not have a good time in high school. Being in high school in the early 2000s, kind of a weird time to be in high school. Between like, you know, our parents talking about how the economy is going to collapse and how this generation is, you know, well, every generation is screwed, but they were particularly pronounced on that. I didn't like high school. I didn't like the way it made me feel. I didn't like the people in it. I didn't like the way that it worked. Long story short, I wore a lot of black. A lot of time spent brooding. But I did know that I loved music, and I was a full-blown music geek, except not really, because I didn't know how to read music. I wasn't classically trained in anything, and even like the band and orchestra kids that I went to school with, they didn't know that I did what I did, and I would see them, you know, behind a conductor, and I would just be like, this entire world escapes me. So between not really subscribing to school and doing things the way one ought, and then not really taking like a music career seriously, I was sort of in a troubled spot. And again, wore a lot of black. But I loved music, and it was like, that was like the thing that got me out of bed. It was the thing that kept me from going to bed. It was the thing that kept me from eating. It was the thing that kept me from having a normal social life or doing any sort of extracurricular activities. Basically anything that like a normal teenager would do, I didn't do. Even hard drugs, I stayed away from that. And in the Midwest, boredom runs rampant, and so the cure for that, from what I found, is drugs. So after I graduated barely from high school, it was like with like a whimper, I went to a community college called College of DuPage. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's in a suburb of Chicago. It's a brilliant and tremendous school, and I miss it dearly sometimes. It was awesome. You go to like the community center, there's always somebody playing D&D. The community center was 24/7, and 24/7 there was someone playing D&D. It was like this metronome of Dungeons and Dragons that was just always going for you. So sorry. I had this all written out on like 9 pieces of paper, and then I was like, no, I'm just going to talk. So in 2006, roundabout, I was still making music. Like the constantness that I was always making music, and I started making music under the name Professor Kliq, which is a play on the name DJ Professor K, which is a character from Jet Grind Radio on the Sega Dreamcast. You guys really need to play this game. Because you're like on rollerblades, and it's in the future. I really don't think I need to tell you anymore. So when I was at College of DuPage and making music and my, you know, clicky clacky bleepy bloopy computer songs, is how I describe it. I met my girlfriend Karen, and she's awesome, and that's exactly what she looks like. And she drew that. So, fair warning. Karen introduced me to her friend Dan, and that's also what Dan looks like. And like anybody that I found myself around frequently, I gave him a CD of my music. I would only burn discs for friends and be like, what you think? But I didn't do anything beyond it. I didn't play shows, I didn't DJ, I didn't do anything. I was just in my room with a mouse and a keyboard and doing that, and being skinny. So I gave him a CD which at the time was called Guns Blazing, which has been out actually since having met Dan, and which some of the songs on there have been some of the reason that I'm here. And he listened to it and he liked it a lot. And he asked me, do you have this up on iTunes or anything? Are you selling this? And I was like, no. He was like, well, would you want to? I'm like, no. And he looked at me strangely and smiled, and he was like, well, have you ever heard of Creative Commons? I was like, no. And so he smiled and scooted over to his desk, and he has restless leg syndrome, and that's Dan. Dan's always like that too. And Dan's awesome. But then he pulled up this website that was just spattered in orange and purple at the time, was cut and still is, called Jamendo. And he sort of showed me around on the site, and he explained this community of artists basically all doing the same thing that I had just described to him, in that their musical currency is just the ability to participate in a global music culture, to just be a part of something bigger and just doing music because that's what they love to do. And so I got to hear people like Binary Pilot, Bit Basic. Well, actually, Binary Pilot's from Germany, Bit Basic is from London. Zoe Lila is also from Germany. A handful of other artists I got to interact with too, like Brad Sucks. Anyone familiar with Brad Sucks? Check out Brad Sucks. It's something else. He's sort of Beck, an early Beck. All right. Got a couple. Oh, okay. Sorry. So he asked me if I wanted to put my stuff up on this website, and I was like, yes, sure. Yes, I responded. So he takes my music and he throws it up on this website. And it took a while, at the time I was just like, well, this is just another music website. I had a MySpace. I'm pretty sure I still have a MySpace. It's been dormant, even after they relaunched MySpace, and I was excited. And then I was like, actually no, never mind, it's not MySpace. So it took time. It took a lot of time, just like anything really worthwhile. But slowly but surely, dozens of listens turned into hundreds, and then hundreds into thousands, and thousands into hundreds of thousands, and then today, my global total listens on Jamendo is well over 1 million, which in the grand scheme of internet, doing things and putting things on the internet really isn't that much, especially considering how long it's been there and how many songs are up. But having put all of my music on Jamendo and all of the stories that would follow is what I think really communicates the value of Creative Commons and why it's something that's really worthwhile. So I was like, I want to go to college because I should, because I'm from America and that's what I think. So having been born in 1986, I am what you would call a millennial, which is a relatively controversial term right now because a lot of people like to point fingers at millennials about things, and let me tell you, they're absolutely right. Because like any good millennial, I decided I needed to go to a private art school in the middle of the city of Chicago and sink myself into a Chick-fil-A sized amount of student loan debt. And this was how I wanted to become an adult. I wanted to go to Columbia College in Chicago. It's a media performing arts school, everything from dance to game design to stage design. The music department was right next to the film and acting department, so there was crossover in musical theater, and I do not like musical theater kids. They're just very all the time. But for the record, I do not regret the decision that I made, or the degree that I got, or even what it cost to get, because in hindsight, there is nothing, well actually there are very few things more valuable to me than having been able to make the decision as to how I wanted to become an adult surrounded by people who were as dedicated as I was to making something that most people laugh at, which is creating art. Somebody like my father would say, well, there's no money in art. And I would argue, like, yes, there is. There's debt in art. So that's sort of what I went into. So I go into the music department. I had taken like a little bit of music courses in high school, which I technically failed, and then went to community college and failed it once there, and then took it again and passed. And on the strength of that, decided to go to music school. And so I was really shocked, sort of, when I first got to Columbia, because I noticed this big dissonance, this music term, this big dissonance between the way that I viewed music culture and the way that, not all of them, I shouldn't even say they, but a lot of them viewed music culture. And by this I don't mean the like, well, my favorite band is the Beatles sort of way. I mean this in the I want to get rich and make it big sort of way. And I was sort of taken aback by that and was sort of creeped out by how many 19, 20-year-old freshmen were already members of like ASCAP and BMI and showing up to class with their 32-cent, ASCAP check. I'm a member of ASCAP. And I would be like, well, I don't know. I actually still don't totally know what that all entails because I've always been Creative Commons and I just sort of married that. But ASCAP and BMI, for those who aren't familiar, are two rights management organizations that have been around for a very, very long time. And music royalties and like suing because of things like crazy lawsuits are nested in why those things exist. It worked for a long time, it really did, and for the media that existed it was perfect, but not really anymore. So I would give my music to some of my friends that I would meet in like aural skills or orchestration, and I'd give them a CD or actually just send them a link because by then SoundCloud had come around, and I love SoundCloud, I love SoundCloud. And they'd be like, they would see like how I had like a number of plays and like I had fans and followers and comments and things like that, and there was a certain level of interaction going on. And they would ask, how did you get this following? Where did you get all these people? They'd be like, well, have you ever heard of Creative Commons? And they'd be like, no. And I would say, well, I give away my music for free, and they'd raise an eyebrow. And then I would also say, well, it's sort of like copyright, but copyright minus things that I don't want to be restrictive about the work that I put out. And they would pretty much always say the same thing. They'd be like, why would you give away your music for free? And I would make the same face and be like, why would I not? And so I immediately felt kind of like out of place. And I thought that in going to an art school, wearing things like this, that I would feel right at home. And in a lot of ways I did, but once in a while I'd be confronted with some people that I just was really, again, taken aback by. I even heard, this was an actual conversation where I explained to someone else the same thing, and he almost got offended, and then said, I would never give my music away for free. And I was sort of intimidated by that, so I walked away and had a Mountain Dew. So here I was in music school, just sort of trying to figure out, where do I stand? Am I doing this wrong? Because all of the music that I had gotten into, everything that I had surrounded myself with up until that point, was from these, relatively obscure music labels like Ninja Tune, Warp Records, home of like Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, ESL Music, which was founded by Avery Corporation, G-Stone Records, most famous for like Kruder and Dorfmeister. I'm probably name dropping a lot of things, we're just going right over here, but that's fine. That's the point, because these were all artists that I got to create my own personal connection with. I found it on the internet, like late at night, on like a radio, like the Windows Media Player radio thing that was like around for a little bit. I found some really cool, like DJ Crush, DJ Cam. I've seen these guys live because of that. These little happenstance occasions where I'd find something on the internet and be like, what is that? And I liked the idea of being that sort of artist. I liked the idea that I didn't have to conform to like what pop music was or anything like that, and just sort of be discovered by people on their own terms, so that, like I did, they could create a soundtrack for their life that's unique and independent and isn't blaring out of car stereos in their hometown or something that they hear on the radio. So I have my stuff up on Jamendo, and I'm in school, and I'm working very, very hard. And when I had first put my stuff up, my friend Dan had told me something about how Jamendo was about to launch a platform called Jamendo Pro. Jamendo Pro is very, 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 very cool. And it is so far, the lasting, or at least the only existing business model for monetizing free Creative Commons music, because in fact, all of the music that you can download on Jamendo is free. I still sell the music that I put up on Jamendo, and people still buy it, but it's still free on Jamendo, and most of the people that listen to what I do found me on Jamendo. So basically, the way that the Jamendo Pro system works is you'll put up some work that have 4 of the 6 most restrictive licenses, and I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the Creative Commons licenses, but basically, if somebody's making a video and they're on like a budget, which, you know, anybody that I've ever met that's making a video for something, generally they're on a budget, they can go into the Jamendo Pro platform and find music that they like. And it's tagged in certain ways to where they're sort of searching through a sound library, but it's not just like sound library stuff. It's actual music made by actual artists with things to say and production value and, you know, that sort of stuff. Even if it's just people on their laptops with Logic Pro, there's at least a message behind the things that they're saying. So a creator can come in, license a Creative Commons work, the artist gets 50%, and Jamendo gets 50%. And everything is very clear cut, it's very simple, there's no lawyers involved, there's no ASCAP, there's no BMI. As a matter of fact, ASCAP, BMI, and licensing music Creative Commons are mutually exclusive. You cannot do one and the other. You do one or the other. And Jamendo makes this very clear before you even upload any of your music to the website. So this took a little bit of time. When I first started making my music available, nothing happened because for a number of reasons. People didn't know who I was, people didn't know what Jamendo was. It was just very new. But slowly but surely, I started seeing little deals trickle in. €5. It was always in euro, which I would later find out was an awesome conversion rate. It would be like €5, and then like €10, €2, and then a week of nothing. And then like €50, and then 2 weeks of nothing. And it took forever and ever and ever. And I didn't really care, because like I said, I wasn't really in it to, get rich or make it big. I was in college for posterity, so I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. But over time, I eventually broke Jamendo's payout minimum of €100. Once you get to €100, you can like request your money, and then they'll PayPal it to you. And the day that they PayPal it to me, I was freaking out because I had made a 3-digit amount of money on music, giving it away for free, which is significantly more than I had ever thought I would make doing that. So that, I was like, this could be very cool. And so I would go and tell my friends in music school, and they'd be like, well, so how long did that take you? And I'd be like, shut up, you guys. So I really can't stress this enough. Not everybody at school was like that. Most of them were very cool and open-minded. I actually was able to switch on a few people to Creative Commons, but I'm just bringing up the negative because I'm like that. So I, around like 2009, I was in school and I had a little bit of a following, and I had like a Facebook page. I had my Facebook fan page where I can do this in other ways. And I would throw out these random thoughts because I don't really take social media seriously. And I argue that no one should. And one day, I was like, I would like to make music for a documentary. Just a brain fart, threw it out there. I didn't really care. I think I did this from my BlackBerry 8520 at the time, which I still have. I don't use it. It's just there. It's like a relic. And within an hour, this guy named Kliq, who was like a fan on the page, was like, would you like to make music for my documentary? Yes, I responded. Kliq is a brilliant photographer, and he's based out of New Zealand, on the other side of the planet. And so he put me in touch with this guy named Glenn Elliott, who was with a company called Budo Bass. It's a very small TV production company. And he told me that they needed music for a TV show that they were making called Ever Wondered. Just like a fun fact kid. I think it may have been for kids show. And it wasn't going to pay a whole lot, but it was certainly paying a lot more than I would have if I got like an odd job working at like a restaurant or something. Well, maybe not a restaurant because servers do pretty good, but let's say Sherwin-Williams. That's what I was going to do. I actually applied to a Sherwin-Williams and didn't get the job. And it was less money than I think a lot of my peers would have said yes to, but I was like, well, why not? And so that was my job for the summer. Over the next 2 months, I would be making music for this TV show that I couldn't see because they hadn't shot it yet, but they just needed music. And so I told them, like, well, how are you going to edit the music to it? And they're like, well, we'll figure it out. I'm like, I like that attitude. so really quick, I made the music and everything, but I made, I think, like 4 different songs, but I made sure to keep them all in the same tempo and all in the same key, but then, you know, drastically change the feel of it. And then I would render the stems of these things so that in their editing applications, they could take these little bits and bobs and pieces of things and make their own soundtrack out of the things that I had made, because I recognized the situation that they were in, and I also recognized that I didn't get to see the show. To date, I have not seen the show. Because I think it was just like local, and it's in New Zealand. How am I going to see that? So all of the music that I had put up, I later would find out from Clive, he had a lot of friends that licensed and used my music. Because they're also photographers, they're videographers, they're creators of some sort that used video and they needed music to put to it. Sometimes they would do it for commercial purposes, sometimes they wouldn't. And the license that I would apply to all of my music up to that point was BY-NC-SA, which is the second most restrictive license. I don't even think I should be giving a talk on Creative Commons for that reason, because it's not quite as free. But basically what it says is, BY says provide attribution. If you use it, you know, put the artist name, track title, maybe like a website or something if you can do that. NC, which means non-commercial. If you're going to make money off of this, I want to also. And we can just have a talk, because like I said, I'm not part of rights management, I don't have a manager, I don't have a thing. You're just talking to me, Mike@ProfessorKliq.com, which is actually my email. If you want to do that. And then SA, which says share alike, that if you are going to use it, share it under the same terms, and perpetuate the beauty that is Creative Commons and what led you to my work and what led you to being able to use it. And it was all of these other photographers that sort of inadvertently made this goofy network that led Clive Copeman to clicking like on Facebook and seeing my post and asking me if I wanted to do music for a documentary, because I had said I wanted to do music for a documentary. All of this is only this clear. Oh, you're not supposed to see that yet. All of this is only this clear in hindsight. I really cannot stress this enough. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, that being said, I want to talk to you guys for a second about gamers. I love gamers. I absolutely love gamers for 3 reasons. 1, I myself am a gamer. I have logged countless hours playing racing games on PlayStation. 2, I love games because of the music that is in games. The guy who made Fez, forget the guy's name. The guy who made Fez had this awesome quote that he said in the indie game, where he said that video games are like the grand merging of all forms of high art together into one thing. And when he said that, I was like, that's it! That's exactly why! And so when I would play these racing games, I'd like get in the zone, and I'm hearing this music in a way that I would never hear it otherwise. Because when you're in the throes of a really nasty course on Ridge Racer, and you've got a permanent indent on your thumb of the circle button, and those songs are just playing over and over again, and you're not getting sick of them, there's something valuable there, and that ended up being a huge part of my childhood. 3, I have always wanted to make music in turn for a video game, namely a racing game, because of that reason. Even when I was a little kid, Streets of Rage 1, Genesis, anybody? Awesome soundtrack. The guy who made it was named Yuzo Koshiro, who actually did a lot of the music for the Sonic the Hedgehog games, etc. Wipeout was an awesome soundtrack. I think Wipeout 2 had like the Chemical Brothers and like Prodigy on the soundtrack, and I had never heard this music before, and I was like, what is this? And that's how I would later get into like Prodigy, Crystal Method and stuff, so it was just me being like, yeah. So